Most video games follow a simple structure. In the beginning, you're eased into mechanics as you solve basic puzzles and defeat simple enemies. The game will likely have a progressive difficulty curve, so by the time you reach the final level, every obstacle thrown your way will force you to combine everything you've learned in order to win. 20 or 30 hours banked, a final boss on the floor, and your character walking off into the sunset. Job is a good one. However, there are some games that totally do not end in celebration. Instead, they conclude with a big ol' gut punch. After enduring every hardship, slaying every enemy, and cracking every puzzle, some titles just end with our heroes biting the dust. Now, there are so many different ways to feel after this depending on what happened, so thankfully it's not always doom and gloom. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game characters who had to die to win. Number 10, Assassin's Creed 3, Desmond Miles. The protagonist of the Assassin's Creed series is, or was, a bartender called Desmond Miles. When Abstergo Industries learn that he's the descendant of the Assassin Order, they ask him to test out the Animus, a machine which lets the wearer relive their ancestors' memories using DNA. At first, Miles doesn't realize the company is actually run by the Knights Templar, sworn enemies of the Assassins. The organization wishes to use the memories of Miles' ancestors to locate technology created by the ancient race, the Isu. One piece the Templars want is the pedestal, an artifact that can apparently see and alter time. One of the pedestal's prophecies shows that solar flares will blanket the Earth in 2012, decimating most of humanity. If Miles places his hand on the artifact though, reality will switch to a timeline where the solar flares don't occur. However, the energy of the pedestal will kill Desmond as well. I will say right now that only in googling this stuff to voice this list did any of this ever make sense. Anyway, refusing to let billions of people die, moany old Des places his hand on the pedestal, sacrificing his life to save the world. Number 9, The Walking Dead, Lee Everett. In the game that put Telltale on the map, you play as convicted killer Lee Everett. On his way to prison, he gets involved in a car crash while the series zombie outbreak occurs. Escaping from his vehicle, he bumps into a little girl called Clementine, and one of the sweetest video game pairings of all time is born. Sadly, since The Walking Dead doesn't have a reputation for happy endings, or like anything good anymore, the player knows that the story will likely end badly. When Lee gets bitten by a walker in Chapter 4, we all realize that his days were numbered. However, you have to decide whether Lee tells his friends about the bite. You have to decide whether Lee cuts his arm off to try and stop the spread of the virus, and later on you tell Clem whether she should put Lee out of his misery whilst he still has control over his mental faculties. The final chapter of this game is heartbreaking as Lee desperately tries to save Clem by getting her to leave, knowing for a fact that he can't protect her for very much longer. Number 8, Halo Reach, Noble 6. There is a simple rule to prequels. If you're playing as a character who was never mentioned in the original, chances are that they died before the events of that game took place. All your character Noble 6 has to do in his final mission then is survive. However, he learns almost immediately that that is impossible since the Covenant aliens just keep coming. He then realizes his true mission is to survive long enough to let the Autumn ships escape. A post-credits scene does show that Noble 6 was slaughtered by the Covenant, but it also reveals that the Autumn made it to the Halo Ring world, proving that his and his team's deaths weren't in vain, helping kick off the events of the Master Chief saga. In fact, it's totally like Rogue One, and speaking of Star Wars, Number 7, Star Wars The Force Unleashed, Starkiller. Taking place after the events of Revenge of the Sith, but before A New Hope, Force Unleashed starts with Darth Vader killing a Jedi and adopting his Force-sensitive son Galen as an apprentice. Vader dubs this student Starkiller and trains him in the ways of the dark side, unbeknownst to his master, Emperor Palpatine. He intends to manipulate Starkiller to murder the Emperor, allowing Vader to rule the Empire. When Starkiller realizes that Vader is using him to further his own agenda though, the apprentice vows to end the Empire once and for all. Of course, we know Starkiller will fail because his story takes place before Star Wars. How can he kill Vader if Vader is the bad guy of the original movie? It just wouldn't make sense. In the final confrontation then, Starkiller has the opportunity to slay Vader but refuses to, knowing it will cause him to be turned to the dark side. Instead, he tries to fight the Emperor but is killed in the process. In this now discarded canon, Starkiller's death inspired the creation of the Rebel Alliance, which then defeats the Empire many years later. Sadly though, Disney came in and wiped all that out, so we got a random planet that was destroyed instead. Number 6, L.A. Noire, Cole Phelps. One of the most unique and divisive games Rockstar would ever help put out, LA Noire put you in the shined shoes of Cole Phelps, a military veteran turned LAPD officer. After gaining a reputation for solving several homicides, young Phelps is eventually moved onto arson cases, where he stumbles onto the connection between a string of recent fires and a shady syndicate being a front to defraud the federal government. In the end, Phelps learns that the arson was committed by fellow serviceman Ira Hoganboom? I'm gonna go with Ira Hogaboom because it's been a long time since I first played this game. Hoganboom was left traumatized after Cole ordered him to torch the inside of a cave in their army days, oblivious that it was housing civilians. Clearly, Phelps didn't play Spec Ops: The Line. Feeling like he is indirectly responsible for turning Hoganboom into an arsonist, Phelps tries to redeem himself. When Hoagie then kidnaps Cole's partner Elsa Lightman though, a pursuit traps Phelps in some sewer tunnels. And after saving his friends, a big ol' rush of water drowns Phelps instantly, giving him the hero sacrifice he couldn't make work otherwise. Number 5, Red Dead Redemption, John Marston. In the second Red Dead game, two government officials, Edgar Ross and Archer Fordham, great name on the latter by the way, are so desperate to take down John Marston's old crew that they threaten his wife Abigail and son Jack, forcing Marston to kill his former gang members for amnesty. Marston unwittingly tracks down each of his former comrades and kills them one by one. Despite fulfilling his side of the deal though, Ross and Fordham send a platoon of officers and soldiers to slaughter Marston anyway. After he helps his family escape, the government's men just blast John to pieces. Wife Abigail then dies 3 years later, leaving Marston's son Jack all on his own. Still consumed with rage after the government double-crossed his father, Jack tracks down a much older Edgar Ross and puts a bullet in his skull, in one of my favorite game moments ever. Still, the whole thing is tinged with sadness. John Marston did everything in his power to ensure that his son never experienced the same life of violence that he did. In the end though, Marston's noble death did cause Jack to continue that same cycle going forward. Number 4, Mass Effect 3, Commander Shepard. In the Mass Effect saga, humanity has been at war with the cybernetic Reaper aliens for years. As we all know, you play as Commander Shepard, an elite soldier tasked with destroying these invaders. After playing as the character across 5 years and 3 games though, fans got pretty damn attached to their personal Shepard. Gamers also felt a connection because nearly every decision that we made affected the characters and the plot. Shepard's actions directly affect what happens in the sequels, and to be honest, it's just the best sci-fi franchise ever, minus the last 10 minutes. Because despite the franchise's legacy, Mass Effect 3 has one of the most hated endings in gaming history. The conclusion had no final boss, was filled with plot holes, and made Shepard's decisions feel completely inconsequential. Even though the player can choose between 3 different endings, they all conclude with Shepard's death. This was extra frustrating since Shepard was dead for 2 years in Mass Effect 2, before being resurrected and being totally fine. Overall, he was brought back using an incredibly expensive procedure just to die again. Number 3, Final Fantasy X, TIDUS. Telling the ha-ha-ha-ing story of TIDUS, an athlete who gets transported to the world of Spira after an entity called Sin destroys his home Zanarkand, I ruddy love the often despised Final Fantasy X. Anyway, TIDUS teams up with several others, including the Summoner Yuna, a religious figure on a pilgrimage to end Sin's reign of tyranny, allowing TIDUS to return home. It is eventually revealed, though, that TIDUS isn't real. He's what's known as a faith, spelt with a Y for some reason, a spirit detached from his mortal form, still interacting with everyone else. See, when Sin decimated Zanarkand, all its inhabitants were killed, including him. Sin governs these twisted rules of life and death, and when it dies, all the souls from Zanarkand will pass on, including TIDUS. After playing for about 40 hours, you should feel exhilarated killing the final boss, but your heart just breaks watching TIDUS try and fail to cling onto Yuna, before fading into nothingness. Number 2, Shadow of the Colossus, Wanda. In Shadow of the Colossus, you play as Wanda, a man grief-stricken after losing his partner Mono. As he lays Mono's body upon the shrine of worship, a mysterious entity called Dormine tells Wanda that he can revive her. Turns out if Wanda slays 16 gigantic golems called the Colossi, Dormine can bring Mono back from the dead. Riding his horse, Wanda traverses the Forbidden Land, destroying these enormous beasts one by one in the hope that he can be reunited with his lover. However, after defeating the final creature, Wanda learns that Dormine has deceived him. Dormine's essence was split into the Colossi in order to trap him in the first place. Dormien knew that the only way he could be revived is if all of these giants were slaughtered, and after Wanda succeeds, Dormien obliterates his essence and resurrects him, but in an infant body. If that sounds depressing, it gets worse. In a twisted sense of be careful what you wish for, Dormien does resurrect Mono, but she wakes to find this mysterious infant rather than her partner. The following scenes imply that she will care for the child, having no idea what happened and only realizing who the baby is after a good amount of time has passed. And that's even if she survives, because there's kinda no food. And number 1, PLANESCAPE Torment, the Nameless One. The protagonist of PLANESCAPE Torment, the Nameless One, appears to be immortal. Every time he dies, he returns to life devoid of memories. Throughout the game, old Nameless travels through different planes of reality to uncover the truth behind this twisted version of mortality. Our hero eventually learns that in his original incarnation, he was a killer. Since he lived a wicked life, Nameless knew that he was destined for the Blood War, this game's version of hell. And to cheat this fate, he'd asked a witch to make him immortal. As you do. The spell caused his mortality to separate from his body, so every time Nameless died, his mortality grew stronger. After perishing countless times, this mortality essence, or something, compounded into a godlike entity called the Transcendent One. The only way for Nameless to truly die is to slay his own mortality. When he sees the Transcendent One wreaking havoc upon the planes and slaying his allies, Nameless is drawn to slaughter his living essence and himself in the process. However, the Nameless One still must pay for the crimes he committed in his original incarnation. Despite saving reality, he's banished to the Blood War Hell, where he'll be tormented for all eternity. Unsurprisingly, PLANESCAPE Torment is considered to have one of the most depressing endings in video game history. At least, that's what I think. Let me know your own picks down in the comments below, and please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast, #WCGP on Twitter, to submit some thoughts and questions along the way. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.